Mira Quaye began her briefing with a lie. "Welcome to Kestrel Station," she said, voice calm. Hands folded behind her back as the recording drone drifted in front of her. "You are safe here." She knew every word that followed was technically accurate and emotionally dishonest. Safe was a relative term in a galaxy where stars could be speared like fruit on a stick and whole colonies erased in the span of a breath. But the phrase steadied new arrivals, and she needed them steady. Behind her, the observation panels showed the slow swirl of the Talaris Nebula, its lavender filaments veining the darkness like frozen lightning. Somewhere inside that haze, a weapon stirred. "The Horizon Pact is fragile," she continued. "Formed under duress, still testing its limits. Our enemy, the Thalkir Dominion, does not respect our treaties or our lives. They have brought the Helios Lance to bear." At the name, she felt the room itself tighten, as if Kestrel's hull remembered every whispered panic that had passed through it. "Your roles," she told the invisible newcomers, "will determine whether this station, the Farwind Array, and Ridgepoint Colony survive the next day." She ended the briefing there. Anything more would have been speculation, and Mira, for all her empathy, had always hated lying twice in the same sentence. The drone chimed completion. The recording would circulate within the hour. She watched her own ghost reflection hang over the nebula, small and human and completely unremarkable in the face of cosmic danger. And still, for reasons she could not yet articulate, she believed that if anything truly impossible happened in the hours ahead, humans would be standing suspiciously close to it. She was not wrong. Commander Leonid Farrow had never enjoyed diplomatic chambers. Even now, with most of his mind analyzing fleet readiness projections, he felt the itch between his shoulder blades that came whenever he had to sit in a chair designed to look neutral and important at the same time. The chamber on Kestrel Station tried for that effect and failed twice over. The Osulan architects had favored smooth, pale surfaces and organic curves meant to soothe tempers. The Calarian consultants had embedded tiny, discrete projectors that could display real-time data in almost any direction. The result was a room that seemed to both beg for quiet and hum with anxiety. Ambassador Thalra Osh coiled her elongated Osulan limbs neatly on the opposite side of the central table. Her glassy eyes, reflective and color-shifting, regarded Leonid with the maddening patience of a professional who had seen entire governments collapse and somehow remained polite. Between them stood a three-dimensional projection of the Helios Lance, all spines and concentric rings, like a cathedral built to worship catastrophic physics. "The path is clear," Leonid said, gesturing at the display. "The Lance emerges from Talaris's cover here, aligns to our plane here, and must hold that orientation for at least a microcycle to fire. That gives us a window." "An uncertain window," Thalra replied. Her mental calculations, swift and layered, had already enumerated a dozen ways this could go wrong. "Your own analysts admit sensor noise from the nebula creates significant predictive error." Calarin Voss, the Calarian strategist, inclined a narrow-scaled head. "Our models account for most of that noise. The remainder will be managed by the Vherix sharp-shot Concorde." At the mention of the Concorde, Leonid's eyes flicked to the far side of the chamber where Archsniper Vherix talons stood as if welded into place. The Vherix leader's physiology was built for precision. Flexible limbs sheathed in fine, articulated armor, multifaceted eyes that could track a grain of dust, a dorsal crest that adjusted microangle by microangle to minute changes in station gravity. Vherix spoke rarely, and when he did, each word sounded measured against an internal metric of necessity. "This is not the most difficult shot we have attempted," Vherix said. He studied the projection of the Lance with professional interest, already visualizing possible sightlines. "It is simply the most important one." Leonid suppressed the urge to smile. Confidence, he knew, could be a suit of armor or a blindfold. Meenal Kulkarni stood slightly behind him, a tablet in hand, eyes flicking between competing data streams. She enjoyed rooms like this the way a climber enjoyed sheer cliffs, not because they were comfortable, but because they represented something to be scaled. "We have confirmed the vulnerability," Meenal said. "An exposed failsafe node embedded in the Lance's outer ring. Size is negligible, but when the weapon reaches peak charge, its protective field alignment shifts. For a fraction of a second, that node is peeking out through the storm." She enlarged the area in question. The tiny, blinking target appeared on the projection like an afterthought, a punctuation mark on the skin of destruction. "Destroy it," she said, and the weapon pauses to reset the chain. "We buy time, minutes at least. Maybe more." "Long enough to do what?" Thalra asked. Leonid thought of Ridgepoint Colony turning to ash. Thought of the Farwind Array human and alien engineers combined, masterpiece shattered and dark. The choices ahead felt less like a menu and more like a pair of nooses. "Long enough," he said, "to keep people alive and find a way to kill it." He did not add, or die trying. That lay quiet in the room all the same. Far beneath the debates of admirals and diplomats, Ridgepoint Colony woke up to dust and wind. Pale Haven, one of its older settlements, lay inside a wind-sculpted valley. The rock walls curled inward like the cupped palm of a hand, layers of mineral and sediment painted in ochres and grays. The locals had long since learned that on certain days, tools hung from hooks tended to sway east instead of west, and stones left on a ledge did not always fall where physics texts suggested they ought to. Hasna Kovács had never read a treatise on microgravitational eddies, but she knew exactly how far a dropped hammer would land from the workbench, and why. She rose as she always did, long before synthetic dawn, bones complaining but still obeying. In the modest structure she called home, she boiled water, checked the atmospheric seals out of old habit, and listened to her grandson snore in the adjoining room. He had insisted on staying through the evacuation notices, mouth full of brave words about defending their home, eyes not quite hiding his fear. Hasna had not argued. She had simply given him a longer hug and made sure he knew where the emergency breather masks were stored. Outside, Pale Haven's main street seethed with activity. Portable shield generators hummed at the settlement's edge. Automated drones trundled by, laying down sensor beacons that glowed faintly in the dust. Human Marines, armor still carrying the sharp lines of new deployment, shouted to one another in clipped, tired voices. Sergeant Jarek Wilkes stood at the center of the chaos, a rifle slung over one shoulder, a datapad held in his calloused hand. He had been in more battlefields than he could easily count, and every one of them had begun to look alike. Noise, confusion, people trying to pretend they were not terrified. This one was different only in that the sky itself felt heavy, as if the impending arrival of the Helios Lance were already bending the air. "Sergeant," a private called, jogging up. "Local elder wants a word. Again." Jarek followed the pointed finger. Hasna Kovács stood by a stack of quarried stone, hands on her hips, expression resolute and unimpressed. The wind tugged at the edges of her scarf. She watched the Marines as if they were children trying to build a treehouse out of wet paper. Jarek approached with the half-amused, half-weary wariness of a man who had been lectured by elders in more settlements than not. "Ma'am," he said. "You're putting that shield on the wrong ridge," Hasna replied, without preamble. Her voice was textured like the stones around them, rough but not unkind. "The wind will shear it and scatter the field. Then you will say, 'Oh no, we have no shield,' and then you will look surprised when we die." Jarek glanced at the generator in question. It sat near the eastern lip of the valley, cables already snaking down the slope. "The placement is calculated," he said. "We ran models based on satellite surveys." "Your satellites don't live here," Hasna said. "I do." He opened his mouth to disagree, then remembered the briefing about unusual local anomalies. Ridgepoint's crust had odd density pockets. The Starliner that first landed here had nearly misjudged its descent. Their equipment was supposed to compensate, but supposed to did not always translate well under fire. "How would you place it?" he asked. Her answer was simple. "Farther in, near the old North Cut. The ridge splits the wind there. The rocks throw back more than they take." He hesitated. Changing the emplacement would mean delays, extra work, potential reprimands if something in their orders got misaligned. And yet something in her matter-of-fact tone and the calm certainty of someone who had watched seasons and storms tear this valley apart and put it back together nagged at him. "Show me," he said. They walked together along a path carved by generations of boots and cartwheels. Hasna pointed out boulders with the offhand familiarity of one introducing old friends. "There," she said finally, tapping a boot against a ridge of stone. "Drop a pebble from that overhang. It won't go straight down. It will lean toward the valley center. Always. We used to lose tools that way until we learned better." Jarek eyed the spot, then climbed up onto the overhang. He took a small nut from his kit and let it fall. It did not drop straight. The path was subtle but unmistakable, a slight curve inward, like water drawn along a shallow channel. He felt the hairs on his arms rise. His mind, long trained to map ballistics in line of sight, quietly updated itself. The valley, he realized, was not neutral ground. It had preferences. "All right," he said. "We move the generator." The private groaned. Hasna smiled. A small, almost secret thing, and returned to her tasks. She did not think of herself as important. She thought of herself as someone who knew how not to get crushed by rocks. It would be enough, she believed, in a universe that usually did not care. She was wrong about that last part. By midday, Kestrel Station vibrated with the cumulative tension of a dozen exhausted species. Farwind Array hung in the distance, visible through the viewport as a delicate constellation of linked platforms and dishes. It was the Horizon Pact's eyes and ears, reading ripples in subspace like a grand listening instrument. Without it, coordination would become guesswork, and guesswork in this war meant death on the scale of worlds. Rafael Ibarra stood in the array's control nexus, his dark hair tied back in a haphazard knot, eyes darting between alien displays translated imperfectly into human-readable formats. He had been granted the dubious honor of integrating human improvisations with Ocelon field generators and Calirian gravitic harnesses. They called it the Bulwark Net. Half the senior engineers had privately labeled it that impossible thing the humans think will work. Field variance at node 3.6, and Ocelon Tech reported, limbs flickering in a gesture that translated to mild annoyance. "Your human conduits are irregular. They're dynamic," Rafael corrected, scaling back the output. "Irregular is when it breaks. This is responsive." In truth, he knew the Bulwark Net was held together by equal parts math and audacity. Proper materials were in short supply. Some connections used repurposed mining equipment. One crucial arc of the system depended on an old human trick involving superconductors and what Rafael had enthusiastically referred to as creative grounding. The Ocelon Tech made a skeptical sound. Rafael grinned despite himself. "If it holds when the lance fires," he said, "you can call it whatever you like. If it doesn't," a quieter part of his mind added, "you won't be around to argue." He pushed that thought down and tuned the next set of coils. Somewhere beyond Farwind, deep in the folds of the nebula, the Helios Lance moved like a predator through tall grass. The first firing window, when it came, was painstakingly cultivated. Horizon Pact ships played a deadly game with the Thalkir Vanguard across the Shard Front Belt, darting between jagged asteroids that glowed faintly with the residue of ancient impacts. Leonid Pharaoh's commands snapped through fleet channels. "Accelerate here, pivot there, feint a retreat to draw the enemy's covering vessels a fraction out of position." Alien captains respected discipline and predictability. Humans, Leonid had discovered, were at their best when plans strained at the seams. In the command gallery on Kestrel Station, a dozen holofeeds converged. The Lance's trajectory, the shifting density of nebular plasma, the power output of Farwind's Bulwark Net. Ridgepoint's local shield readings, everything pulsed in shades of risk. Meenal Kulkarni stood beside Caloran Voss, both sets of eyes locked on the thin gold line that represented the Lance's path. "Here," Caloran said, placing a fingertip on the projected orbit. "When it clears this fragment of the Shard Front Belt, its field alignment must reconfigure. The gap around the Failsafe will open." Meenal's calculations agreed. She felt the numbers settle into place like a puzzle whose last piece had finally slid home. "Concord, this is Kestrel," she said into the channel. Window opening in 3.2, 3.1. On a secondary firing platform, extended from Kestrel's underbelly, Arch-Sniper Vherix Talon and his chosen marksmen were already in position. Their rifles were masterpieces of alien engineering, barrels folded and unfolded on invisible pivots, quantum sights layered across multiple probabilities. Vherix exhaled slowly, his metabolism deliberately slowed. Time for him stretched. In the instant before he fired, he tasted every tiny change. Minuscule shifts in station gravity, the almost not there electromagnetic thrum of the far-off lance. The silent calculations beamed into his targeting trees from Meenal and Caloran's models. He fired. The shot rode a path punched open by exotic fields, a needle threading a labyrinth. Mid-flight, micro-thrusters along its casing adjusted its course by imperceptible fractions. It missed. Not by much. Enough. On Kestrel, a faint groan rippled through the crew. Meenal's jaw clenched. She ran diagnostics even before the first impact telemetry returned. "The Lance compensated faster than expected," she said. "Its field snapped back into alignment in absurd time." Vherix listened, head tilted. His pride stung, a sharp and unfamiliar sensation. The Concorde did not miss. The Concorde adjusted reality until it fit their weapons. "We try again," he said. They did. 3 more windows. 3 more shots with minute variances, each one a masterpiece in its own right. Each one diverted, deflected, dissipated by the complex, churning environment and the Lance's own layered defenses. By late cycle, the room began to feel haunted by the near misses, every failed shot leaving a spectral echo in the tactical logs. "The probabilities are converging toward unacceptable failure," Caloran said quietly. Thaura OC shifted, the Ocelon equivalent of a sigh. "And the weapon?" she asked. Meenal displayed the Lance's charge curve. It rose, a smooth, unforgiving line toward critical. It will reach firing readiness within the next partial cycle, she said. We may get one, maybe 2 more credible windows. After that, it fires. Target? Leonid asked. Undetermined, Meenal replied. But its current vector, it could swing to either the Farwind Array or Ridgepoint. The distinction between unacceptable and catastrophic blurred. On Ridgepoint, the sky changed. The first colonists noticed the difference without needing instruments. The light grew slightly thinner, as if something vast were interposed beyond the clouds. Hasna Kovács was arguing with a stubborn generator when her grandson ran up, breath puffing in short bursts. Nana, he gasped. Look! She straightened, spine flaring in protest, and followed his pointing gesture. High above, a thin, unnatural line was emerging in the sky. It glowed with a color that did not belong to any dawn or dusk. Not yet a beam, not yet a lens, just the suggestion of one, a hint of intent made visible. So, she thought, it is real after all. She felt no panic. She did feel an old, familiar anger, the kind that had risen in her chest when mining companies had threatened to cut corners on safety, when bureaucrats on distant worlds had written off Ridgepoint as resource-effective but expendable. Now someone, somewhere, had run a calculation and placed her home in a column labeled acceptable losses. Get below, she told her grandson. Help the others check seals. What about you? He asked. I'll be there, she said. Someone has to make sure these soldiers do not leave sharp edges for us to stumble over. He hesitated, then nodded and ran. She watched him go, then turned back to the generator, fingers already finding misaligned clamps. Sergeant Jarek, a dozen meters away, lifted a hand to his helmet as Leonid's voice crackled in. Wilk, this is Pharaoh. We may need ground assistance for targeting. Can your team handle auxiliary relay duties? Jarek's reply was immediate. If you can beam it down here, we'll make it sing, Commander. He believed that. He had grown up in a culture that prized the statement, we'll figure it out above, we have no idea how. He did not yet understand what that promise would cost. In the command chamber, the debate sharpened like a blade. They will target the array, Thalra insisted. Its destruction cripples the Pact's coordination. It is the logical, ruthless choice. That is exactly why they may not choose it, Leonid countered. Logical, ruthless choices are predictable. The Thalkir have learned modulated chaos from this war. Hitting Ridgepoint sends a message. It breaks morale. It shows they are willing to burn civilians to ash. That is speculation, Caloran said. The strategist species found comfort in data and despair in guesswork. Yes, Leonid replied, and they know we know that. They will choose the option that hurts us in ways our models don't fully capture. Meenal watched the argument ping-pong across the room. Part of her agreed with each side. Part of her hated them both because all their elegant reasoning still ended with people dying. Incoming data skewed the debate. Thalkir fleet elements shifted deep in the Shard front belt, diverting a portion of their guard to cover a line aimed not at Farwind but at Ridgepoint's star. They're realigning, she said. Their cover vessels are moving to shield the Lance's firing vector toward Ridgepoint. Thalra's glassy eyes dulled in sorrow. Leonid's shoulders tensed as though he were physically trying to hold the incoming strike back. We can't intercept in time, he said. Kestrel's weapons don't have the angle. Farwind must stay defensive. That leaves the Concord and Ridgepoint. He looked at Vherix. The shot will need ground-based targeting assistance, Caloran said, already running the numbers. Local anomalies have increased our error bars. Standard coordinates are insufficient. The anomalies, Meenal murmured, a piece of the puzzle twisting inside her mind. Ridgepoint's crust, the valley patterns, we've been modeling them as noise. Noise is a human word for data we do not understand, Caloran replied. Leonid opened a channel to Ridgepoint. Jarek Wilk ducked under a half-installed shield plate as Leonid's orders came through. Sergeant, we're sending you a ground targeting suite. Local conditions are scrambling our long-range math. If you can fix a marker in the Lance's near field, the Concord can adjust mid-flight for one final attempt. He glanced at the sky, where the faint, unnatural line had brightened. One final attempt, Jarek echoed. He tasted the words. Understood. The suite arrived as a sleek, coffin-sized container that hummed faintly. Within it lay glossy equipment that would have looked at home on any advanced warship, tripod emitters, calibration lenses, a small fusion pack. Jarek and his squad deployed them in the valley's center, near the spot Hasna had insisted they use for the shield generator. Sweat mixed with dust across his brow as he worked, the local gravity subtly off in tiny, irritating ways. Field Generator 1 online, a private called. Targeting emitter spooling, another reported. Jarek checked the calibration readouts. Lines of numbers scrolled. A red warning icon pulsed. Variance exceeds tolerance, the device chirped in a voice that sounded far too calm. Compensate, Jarek muttered, adjusting the tripod. The beam indicator shifted, then stuttered back into warning status. He walked a circle around the device, watching the dust. It moved in strange patterns, eddies forming where the valley's curves tugged at the wind. "I told you," Hasna said. She had remained nearby, a silent observer until now. "The rocks here like to argue with gravity." "We need a clean line," Jarek said, frustration gnawing at him. "Something the Concorde can lock onto. If the marker's off, their shot will be off." He thought of the centuries of expertise the Concorde represented. It seemed obscene that their skills might be wasted because of a stubborn valley. Hasna studied the emitter. To her eyes, it was an overcomplicated lantern that did not know which way was down.
"What do they need?"
she asked. "Something precise," Jarek said. "A bright point, timed exactly as the Lance's failsafe becomes vulnerable. They'll tweak their shot in flight based on its position. And this thing cannot do it," she said. "Not in time to recalibrate around the anomalies," he replied. He didn't say what he was thinking, that they were about to watch a god weapon burn their colony because a piece of very smart machinery could not admit it was out of its depth. Hasna's gaze drifted away, up the valley walls. She saw the old quarry scars, the ridges where blasting charges had misfired and rock had fallen in inconvenient patterns. She remembered an accident, yearly maintenance, her own hands stained with dust as she dug a trapped worker out from under an avalanche of stone that had not fallen correctly. She had learned over decades the personality of this valley. "Maybe it cannot," she said slowly, "but something else can." She walked away before he could ask what she meant, her boots finding every subtle step in the terrain without conscious thought, the way a musician's fingers find strings. In the firing gallery, time shrank into pulses. "The Lance is locking orientation," Minal reported. "Ridgepoint is in its firing arc. This is it." Thalra's inner membranes drew tight over her eyes. Osulon prayers had no words, they were gestures made with the whole body. She could not kneel here, but some part of her coiled inward in appeal nonetheless. Caloran fed updated trajectories to Vherix's console. "Without a ground marker, your chances drop below functional thresholds," the strategist warned. Vherix in his harness did not flinch. He had made impossible shots before. He would make this one because not making it was unthinkable. "Ridgepoint," Leonid said into the open channel. "We need your marker now." Static hissed, smoothed, then Jarek's voice came through. "Commander, the targeting suite isn't stabilizing. Local anomalies are chewing it up." Leonid's knuckles went white against the edge of the console. Every instinct told him to order some decisive action, to demand a solution as if sheer will could produce one. He swallowed it down. "Do whatever you can," he said. "Any disturbance at the right place is better than none." Minal's eyes met his. She wanted to apologize for the math, for the stubbornness of the universe. He wanted to apologize for asking her to make the numbers kinder than they could be. Neither spoke. Hasna Kovács returned carrying a rock. It was not a special rock. It was hand-sized, smoothed by time and handling, its surface marbled with dull colors. She had used similar stones as hammers when tools broke, as weights to hold down tarps in sudden gusts. Jarek stared at it, then at her. "You're kidding. Do I look like someone who makes jokes when stars are trying to kill me?" she asked. He opened his mouth to protest, then looked into her lined face. Behind the irritation lay a bedrock of calm. She was angry, yes, but not frantic. Her mind was doing something he could not quite follow, connecting a lifetime of small experiences into something audacious. He realized in that moment that she was doing what he did with rifles. He read wind and distance and motion, she read rock and weight, and the invisible hands that nudged them. "What's your plan?" he asked. "Your sniper friends need a marker and a place your toy cannot put one," she said. "But the valley has its habits." She pointed up to a particular jut of stone high on the wall. "From there, if you throw something this weight at that angle, it hits that shelf, bounces, and goes. There." Her weathered finger traced a path through the air, ending at a point a few dozen meters up, where sunlight flickered strangely. She did not know the words localized gravitic shear. She knew that once, a cart full of tools had toppled and everything in it had flown, not down but into that stretch of sky. "At around the time your big gun in the sky thinks we will all be polite and stay where we are," she added. Jarek imagined the arc. He pictured the stone's path, the ricochet, the second leap. He could not see the exact outcome, but his instincts recognized the skeleton of something workable. "You're talking about hitting a speck on a weapon in orbit," he said. "I am talking about hitting our own sky in just the wrong way," she replied. "Your friends up there can do the rest, yes?" Could they? Vherix did not know. But he knew the Helios Lance would fire whether they believed in grandmothers or not. He keyed the open channel. "Kestrel, this is Ridgepoint. We may have a non-standard marker option." In the command gallery, that phrase landed like a thrown knife. "Define non-standard," Caloran demanded. Vherix hesitated. Mira Quaye, listening from her console, already felt a wild hope prickling along her skin. Humans, she thought, were incapable of having a normal crisis. "Local elder believes she can put a mass through the right point in the air," Vherix said. "Exploiting the anomalies we've been fighting. No tech. Just her and a rock." Silence flooded the line. Meenal's brain tried to reject the idea, then circled back. A rock was a mass. A mass moving through a distortion was a measurable event. The math did not care whether the object in question had a firmware update. Vherix Talon surprised himself by being the first to speak. "Can she do it at the precise time I need?" he asked. Hasna, overhearing, tilted her head back to study the sky. The thin, bright line of the Lance's forming beam had deepened in color, thickening like a muscle tensing. "Tell him," she said, loud enough for Vherix's mic to catch. "I have been throwing stones at this valley since before he was born. If your timing is as good as you claim, we can meet in the middle." Vherix processed the translation. Some part of him bristled at the implied challenge, another part, buried under discipline, admired the confidence. In a universe ruled by indifferent physics, confidence was often a form of madness. And yet he had seen mad things succeed. "Very well," he said. "We will try." Meenal's fingers flew. She recalculated the firing window, this time modeling the valley not as noise but as a funnel. She roughly approximated the path Hasna had described, turned it into variables, prayed she was not insulting reality too badly. "Sergeant," she said, "we'll open the window in approximately 0.9 microcycles. She needs to throw when I give you the cue. Whatever path that rock takes, Vherix will adjust around it." "Copy," Vherix said. He turned to Hasna. "You heard the lady. Show me what a lifetime of throwing stones can do." Hasna rolled the rock in her palm, feeling its weight settle into the hollow of her hand. Her joints complained as she stretched. The climb up to the chosen ledge was not easy, but her muscles remembered the motion better than they remembered inaction. She ascended, each foothold chosen without thought. Below, Marines and colonists watched in hushed astonishment as an elderly woman climbed toward what looked, from their vantage, like the open mouth of death. At the lip, the wind was stronger. It tugged at her scarf, whispered along her skin. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, recalling the last time she had stood here repairing a rope line, cursing a broken drill, the rockfall that had almost taken her friend's leg. She opened them again and looked up. The sky directly above the valley shimmered faintly. The Helios Lance's distant presence warped light, a subtle lensing effect that only someone who had stared at this patch of sky for decades could easily spot. Hasna judged the angle. Far above, the Lance's Failsafe node rotated toward exposure, an arrogant eye about to blink open. In the firing gallery, Meenal began a countdown. Window in 3, 2. Vherix's rifle aligned along an impossible arc. His breath slowed. His mind, trained across countless drills, locked onto the abstract idea of a target he could not yet see. 1, Vherix, below, called up. "Now, Hasna." She did not hear the exact word. She did not need to. Her body had already moved. The throw was not graceful. It did not need to be. Her arm extended, momentum channeling through muscles knit by years of hard labor. The rock left her hand and entered the air as an extension of every stone she had ever moved. For a moment, it flew in a simple, clean arc. Then it struck the angled face of a protruding ledge, the one Hasna had aimed for and missed many times, long ago when she was still mapping the valley's quirks. The rock ricocheted, its path no longer polite. It spun, clipped an invisible gradient in the local gravity, and rose, not fell. Gasps erupted from the valley floor as it climbed, as if a thread had plucked it from below. In the command gallery, sensors painted a tiny, chaotic mass moving through the Lance's projected near-field zone. "There!" Meenal shouted. Marker anomaly at coordinates Delta 9 point, correct for the upward vector. Vherix did not wait for the full set of numbers. His sights overlaid the anomaly with the Lance's fail-safe node's predicted emergence. His training screamed at him, his intuition, honed in a dozen pressure-cooked firefights, overruled it. Now, some deep, wordless part of him said. Now, if you want to deserve the title you wear. He fired. The bullet left the Concorde's rail in a flare of barely contained energy, punching into the complex web of gravity, plasma, and mineral dust between Kestrel and the Lance. Mid-flight, its onboard systems received Menel's frantic last-moment corrections, then a final override, a small deviation that none of the models had suggested. Vherix had, in defiance of perfect calculations, trusted the rock. The stone, for its part, knew nothing of trust. It tumbled onward, ignorant of war and destiny. It intersected a sliver of the Helios Lance's outer protective field at the precise moment that field's configuration had to warp to expose the Failsafe node. The impact should have been meaningless. The rock disintegrated, its mass dispersed into a cloud of high-speed fragments. But in doing so, it scruffed the field just enough to drag a tiny portion of it out of symmetry. The delicate balance around the Failsafe node faltered for a fraction of a heartbeat. In that fraction, the Concorde's bullet arrived. Freed from the worst of the field's deflecting influence, it screamed through the gap like a promise kept and struck the Failsafe assembly dead center. From a distance, on Kestrel's displays, the Helios Lance flared with a sudden internal conflict. Energy built for focused annihilation found its path yanked sideways. On Ridgepoint, the thin, bright line that had been gathering in the sky split into a ragged blossom of light. It spread outward and upward, forming curtains of shimmering color rather than a single murderous beam. The Bulwark Net around Farwind Array howled as its coils absorbed stray energies. Rafael's readings spiked to numbers that would have been impossible in peacetime simulations. Emergency safeties tripped. Improvised conduits glowed, then cooled, but the array remained intact. The Helios Lance, gutted of its failsafe, tripped its own emergency protocols. Rings spun out of alignment. Its charging cascade stuttered, then cascaded into a carefully directed venting sequence, dumping lethal power into the void rather than onto Ridgepoint's surface. The weapon survived, but it could not fire again without extensive repair. In Palehaven, people who had been bracing for fire found themselves bathed instead in an eerie alien aurora that danced across the torn sky. Colors rolled over one another, reflecting in wide eyes and tear-wet faces. Silence followed, deep and stunned. Hasna, still on the ledge, watched the lights for a moment, then sat down abruptly. Her shoulders shook not from fear, but from the effort she had just expended. "Stupid rock," she muttered, though her tone was fond. "About time you listened." Below, her grandson shouted her name, voice cracking. Jarek laughed once, a raw, disbelieving sound, and keyed his calm. "Kestrel," he said. "Tell your Concorde they're sharing the credit on this one." In the command gallery, people began to breathe again. Mira Quaye, who had been holding onto the edge of her console hard enough to dent it, let go and pressed a hand over her eyes. Menel replayed the telemetry over and over, brain buzzing with new questions. She saw the anomalies, the rock's path, the momentary failure of the Lance's field. She understood, suddenly and viscerally, that their models did not just miss small details. They had missed whole categories of reality, lived experience, pattern recognition built over dusty decades, the human habit of paying attention to irrelevancies until those irrelevancies became salvation. Thaura OSG uncoiled, allowing relief to ripple through her limbs. She had served on countless negotiation teams. She recognized a turning point when she saw one. This was not merely survival. This was a story being born. And Vherix Talon, still in his harness, exhaled. Pride warred with humility inside him. He had fired the shot. A human grandmother with a stone had made that shot possible. He decided after a minute that there was no shame in sharing greatness with someone who had clearly earned it. The days that followed were filled with the work of survival. Patching damaged systems, tending to those injured by secondary effects, recalibrating the Bulwark Net, tracking the Helios Lance as it limped back into nebular cover. But amidst the repairs and reports, a new conversation began. Leonid Pharaoh descended to Ridgepoint as soon as it was tactically safe. He stepped out of the shuttle into a valley that still smelled faintly of burnt air and ozone. The light above had returned to normal, but people looked at the sky with a new wariness, as if it might still surprise them. Hasna waited near the quarry edge, cane in hand now, more for everyone else's peace of mind than her own. Jarek stood beside her, arms crossed, looking like someone trying to pretend he had not just watched a legend form. Leonid approached, accompanied by Vherix Talon, Thalra Osish, and Caloran Voss. A small crowd gathered at a polite distance, curiosity and awe twined together. "Hasna Kovács," Leonid said, stopping in front of her. "On behalf of the Horizon Pact, I don't start with titles. she interrupted. They make my ears itch. Are you the one who made the stupid decision to keep my home instead of some fancy array somewhere else? Leonid blinked, then smiled despite himself. I'm one of the stupid ones, yes. Then thank you, she said simply. Her eyes flicked to the remarkable assortment of aliens behind him. Are these the friends who missed the shot? Vherix's dorsal crest rippled minutely. Thalra suppressed a chuff of amusement. We did not account sufficiently for local conditions, Vherix said. His voice held no defensive edge now, only acknowledgement. Your intervention corrected that. My throw made a small annoyance in their big toy, Hasna said. You did the real work. Caloran's eyes shone with analytical fascination. Your knowledge of the valley's anomalies was highly specific. You lacked our instrumentation, yet you predicted the rock's path within a tiny margin of error. How? Hasna considered the question. By living here, she said. By getting hurt when I guessed wrong, and paying attention until I stopped guessing. Leonid watched as that sentence planted itself in 3 very different minds. Vherix, who had always believed in training to perfection, realized that perfection could look different outside a firing range. Thalra, who had long valued consensus and procedure, glimpsed the power of stubborn, individual insight. Caloran, who worshipped data, recognized that data could be written in scars and habits as much as in numbers. We want to learn, Leonid said. Not just from you, but from what you represent. Humans are messy, Hasna interjected. Impulsive. We break things that work and patch things that should be thrown away. Yes, Leonid agreed. And somehow, that messiness keeps saving us. Our alien allies have models, histories, structures we lack. We have... He glanced up at the ledge where she had stood, at the sky she had struck. We have a talent for seeing sideways. Mira Quaye, who had accompanied the delegation, stepped forward. We can build on that, she said. Training programs that match your experience with their precision. Teams where human intuition is not a last resort but a starting parameter. Rock-throwing classes? Hasna asked dryly. In a way, Mira replied. Not just rocks. Fields, markets, negotiations, situations where the data is too noisy or sparse for conventional models, but a human brain can still smell something wrong. Thalra inclined her head. Oselan clans have long valued seers of pattern. We did not imagine we would find such seers in quarry elders on frontier worlds. You will find them everywhere, Rafael Ibarra said over the channel from Farwind, patched into the conversation. Every mechanic who hears a wrong note in a humming coil, every nurse who knows a patient will itch. Crash before any monitor shows it. We just call it experience until someone puts a name to it. Meenal, listening from Kestrel, added, we can model around it. Or try. At least enough to know when to ask the right people the right questions. Hasna listened to all this with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant pride. She had thrown a rock. The rest, in her view, belonged to people who liked drawing lines on screens. Just remember, she said finally, your models won't throw themselves. You still need hands. Months passed. The Helios Lance vanished deeper into the Talaris Nebula, licking its wounds. Intelligence reports suggested the Thalkir Dominion was furious, their command cast torn between shame and vengefulness. The Yadari swarm, ever restless at the galaxy's edges, shifted in ways that made strategists nervous. On Kestrel Station, a small stone sat in a clear case outside the Horizon Pact's central planning chamber. It was not, in fact, the stone Hasna had thrown that one had been turned to vapor and math. This was a similar one, plucked from Pale Haven by a Marine with an eye for symbolism. The plaque below it bore a simple inscription in several languages, initial conditions. Within the chamber, new patterns emerged. Human officers were no longer merely subordinate to ancient alien doctrines. They were embedded in planning teams by design. Any operation that depended on precision now had, by requirement, at least one heuristic specialist, usually a human with a background that had nothing to do with conventional tactics and everything to do with noticing how reality liked to cheat. The Vherix Sharpshot Concord proposed an exchange program. Their best marksmen would train alongside human soldiers on worlds like Ridgepoint, practicing not just orbital shots but line-of-sight intuition, as Vherix described it, with a tiny hint of wryness. On Ridgepoint itself, life clawed its way back toward normal. The valley still needed tending, crops still needed water, children still needed scolding. Sergeant Jarek Wilk returned once between assignments. He found Hasna near the same quarry edge, throwing small stones idly at a target painted on the wall. "You're late," she said without turning. "For your lesson." "What lesson?" he asked. She pointed to his rifle. "That one. Put it down. Pick up a rock." He obeyed, laughing, then fell silent as she began to speak not about angles and range in the terms he knew, but about weight and wind and the way the world, when you paid close enough attention, told you how it wanted to be moved. Under her guidance he learned that great shots were made not only with scopes and calculations, but with a kind of listening. Far above them, in spaces where light took its time, fleets maneuvered and new threats coalesced. Somewhere out there, the Thalkir Dominion was already sketching designs for the next generation of weapons, and the Yadari swarm's restless motion hinted at storms yet to come. But for the moment, in a valley on a stubborn human colony, an old woman and a soldier practiced throwing rocks, teaching each other how to aim not just at targets, but at the thin, fragile spaces where fate could still be nudged. The galaxy would learn, again and again, that humanity's greatest weapon was not any cannon or shield. It was the infuriating, miraculous way humans could look at an impossible problem, pick up whatever was at hand, and say, "We'll figure it out."